Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be tackling something that I know a lot of you struggle with.
Okay.
It's that feeling of being stuck between knowing what you want to say in English,
Yeah.
but then not being able to actually say it fluently.
Right.
You know that feeling when the words are like right there on the tip of your tongue, but actually getting them out feels like you're like wading through mud.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to be exploring this approach called Think Smart, Speak Fluent,
Okay.
which honestly has helped so many people break free from that struggle.
That stuck feeling is so common, but you know what? The
Yeah.
good news is fluency is less about having this perfect vocabulary, and it's more about how you approach thinking and speaking
Okay.
in English.
So it's not about like becoming a walking dictionary.
Right.
It's more about rewiring our brains a little bit.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued. Okay. So in the material that you sent over, one of the things that you highlighted was that one of the biggest roadblocks to fluency is actually our own thought process.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about that?
Absolutely. So many learners get trapped in this habit of translating everything from their native language. And that creates this mental bottleneck.
Okay.
I want you to imagine like trying to cross a river
Right.
with this like pile of bricks, and you're laying down one brick at a time to like form this path. It's slow.
Yeah.
It's tedious. And by the time you get to the other side,
Yeah.
everyone's moved on.
That is such a vivid analogy. I can totally see how that mental translation would just make everything so clunky
Yeah.
and hesitant. So how does this Think Smart, Speak Fluent method help us ditch the bricks and like find a smoother way across?
The key is to train your brain to think directly in English. It's like building a mental bridge instead of constantly like putting down these individual bricks.
Right.
And that has a few major advantages. First,
Yeah.
it speeds up your thinking process, so no more mental gymnastics translating back and forth. Second, it boosts your confidence because you're not constantly second-guessing yourself.
Right.
And then finally, the more you think in English, the stronger those neural pathways in your brain become.
Okay, hold on a second. Neural pathways.
Yeah.
For those of us who aren't neuroscientists, could you break that down a bit?
Of course. So think of it this way. Every time you use English, you're creating this tiny little path in your brain. And the more you use those paths, the wider and smoother they become, like a well-worn hiking trail.
Oh, okay.
So the more you think in English, the easier it becomes for your brain to process and then produce the language.
So it's like building a superhighway for our English thoughts to travel on.
Exactly.
I love that. But how do we actually start doing this?
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty big mental shift.
It might seem daunting at first, but you can start small.
Okay.
Instead of launching into these like complex sentences, just try describing simple things around you in English.
Okay.
Like, this coffee is hot, or I like the smell.
So kind of like giving our inner monologue an English accent.
Exactly. You can narrate your day, describe your surroundings, even have these little arguments with yourself. All in English, of course.
I don't like that. Okay.
And then another really powerful technique is visualization.
Right.
When you encounter a new word, instead of translating it, try to create a mental image or associate it with a feeling.
Okay.
So let's say you hear the word sparkling, right? Don't think of the word in your native language.
Yeah.
Instead, picture a glass of champagne bubbling or a starry night sky.
It's about connecting with the meaning and like the feeling
Yes.
that the word evokes rather than getting lost in translation.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I imagine this also helps with remembering new vocabulary.
Absolutely. The more senses that you involve in the learning process, the better your brain will retain the information.
Yeah, okay.
It's like creating a multi-sensory experience for each word.
I like that. Okay, so we can narrate our day. We can visualize.
Yes.
Anything else we can do?
Yeah, you can also engage in these internal dialogues. So ask yourself questions throughout the day in English. Like, what am I doing? What do I need to get at the store? What am I looking forward to this weekend? By having these mental conversations, you're flexing those English thinking muscles.
Yeah.
And it just starts to feel more natural.
It's like giving our inner voice a crash course
Right.
in English conversation.
Yeah.
Now, what about learning from other fluent English speakers?
Okay.
How can we kind of tap into their expertise?
That's where shadowing comes in.
Yeah.
It's a technique where you listen to audio in English. So this could be podcasts, audiobooks, even YouTube videos. And you try to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
Oh,
It's
well.
like having this personal language coach right in your ear.
So we're trying to become like vocal chameleons blending in with the sounds of native English?
In a way, yes,
Okay.
but don't worry, you'll still retain your own unique voice. Shadowing is about absorbing the nuances of spoken English, becoming attuned to that natural flow and musicality of the language.
So to find that rhythm,
Yeah.
that natural ebb and flow.
Precisely. And to really maximize the benefits of shadowing, you need to choose materials that are engaging and relevant to your interests.
That makes sense.
So think about podcasts on topics that you love, audiobooks with captivating storylines,
Uh-huh.
or even interviews with people that you admire.
Okay.
The more you enjoy the content, the more motivated you'll be to practice.
It's about turning language learning into something enjoyable
Yeah.
and almost addictive.
Yes.
You mentioned finding materials that are like appropriate for our level.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know if something is too easy or too challenging for like effective shadowing practice?
That's a great question. You want to find that sweet spot where you understand the gist of what's being said,
Yeah.
but you're also challenged to keep up with the speaker's pace and pronunciation. If you find yourself constantly pausing to look up words or rewind sections, the material might be too difficult.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you can easily repeat everything without much effort,
Yeah.
it might be time to step up the challenge.
So it's a little bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yes.
Not too hard,
Right.
not too soft, but just right.
Exactly.
Now, I know we often think of language practice as like needing a partner.
Yeah.
But earlier you mentioned talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about why that's so beneficial?
It might feel a little strange at first,
Okay.
but trust me, talking to yourself is a game changer.
Hmm.
It allows you to practice speaking without any pressure or judgment.
Okay.
You can experiment with different phrases, work on your pronunciation, and even have those imaginary arguments that we talked about earlier, all in the privacy of your own head.
So it's like having a personal language laboratory
Exactly.
right inside our minds.
Yeah, and since there's no one there to correct you, you're free to make mistakes and learn from them at your own pace.
Okay.
It's like this safe space to explore the language and build your confidence.
I love that idea of a safe space for language practice.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off of perfection
Uh-huh.
and allows us to just play with the language.
Yeah, and if you want to take it a step further, you can record yourself speaking.
Okay.
Listening back to those recordings can be incredibly insightful.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear areas where you might need to slow down, adjust your intonation,
Mm-hmm.
or work on connecting your words more smoothly.
So it's like becoming our own language coach and critic.
Exactly.
Hopefully a kind and encouraging one.
Yes. The goal isn't to beat ourselves up over every little mistake,
Okay.
but rather to identify areas where we can improve and celebrate the progress that we've made.
It's about shifting that mindset from self-criticism to self-improvement.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah.
from rewiring our brains to thinking English to embracing the power of self-talk
Uh-huh.
and even becoming our own language coaches.
Right.
But how do we actually put all of this into practice in a structured way?
That's where the 1-Minute Fluency Challenge comes in.
Ooh. Okay, tell me more about this challenge.
It's the simple but incredibly effective exercise that you can do anywhere, anytime.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right, so
Yeah.
the 1-Minute Fluency Challenge is all about pushing yourself to speak spontaneously for a full minute without stopping. You pick a topic, anything that interests you, set a timer, and just go for it.
That sounds both terrifying and exhilarating. What if we
Yeah.
get stuck or like draw a blank?
That's part of the challenge. It forces you to think on your feet and come up with ways to keep the conversation flowing if you stumble. Use filler phrases like, let me see, or what I'm trying to say is, or rephrase what you were just saying. The key is to keep talking.
So it's like a mental treadmill for our English skills, keeping those words pumping.
Exactly.
Do you have any tips for like choosing effective topics for this challenge?
Yeah, start with something simple and familiar, like describing your favorite hobby or summarizing a recent news article. As you gain confidence, you can move on to more abstract topics or even impromptu storytelling. And of course, record yourself so you can review your performance later.
That's such a good idea because then you can listen back and not only identify areas for improvement, but also just highlight all the progress that you've made.
Exactly.
It's like a tangible record of your fluency journey.
Yes, and don't be afraid to experiment with different recording methods. You can use your phone's voice memo app, a dedicated recording device, or even online speech recognition software. The important thing is to find a method that works for you and allows you to analyze your speech comfortably.
It's all about making the learning process as enjoyable and accessible as possible. Now, we've talked a lot about like specific techniques for improving fluency,
Yeah.
but what are some common misconceptions or pitfalls that learners should be aware of?
One of the biggest misconceptions is that fluency equals speed. Many learners believe that they need to speak as quickly as native speakers, which can lead to mumbled words, skipped syllables, and just a general lack of clarity.
So it's not about winning a verbal sprint. It's more about finding a comfortable pace
Yeah,
that allows us to express ourselves clearly.
exactly. Natural speech has a rhythm and flow with pauses, inflections, variations, and speed.
Hmm.
Those subtle nuances are just as important as pronunciation and grammar.
It's about finding that sweet spot where clarity meets expressiveness. What about grammatical accuracy? Is
Mm.
that something that we should be like hyper-focused on
Yeah.
during the fluency building process?
Of course, grammar is important, but it shouldn't be a barrier to fluency. Think of it this way. When you're first learning to ride a bike, you're wobbly, you might fall a few times,
Hmm.
but the goal is to keep moving forward. You don't stop every few feet to analyze your balance or adjust your handlebars with surgical precision. Similarly, when you're speaking, focus on getting your message across, even if you make a few grammatical errors along the way.
So it's about embracing the imperfections and focusing on the joy of communicating,
Yeah.
rather than getting bogged down by the fear of making mistakes.
Precisely. Perfection is an illusion, especially when it comes to language learning. What truly matters is the ability to connect with others, to share your thoughts and ideas, and to navigate real-world situations with confidence.
It's about embracing that messy, beautiful journey of language acquisition. Another pitfall that you mentioned is this tendency to translate everything in our heads.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you expand on why this is such a fluency killer?
When you're constantly translating, you're essentially creating a mental traffic jam.
Okay.
Your brain is working overtime, juggling two languages simultaneously, which leads to delays, hesitation, and a loss of spontaneity. It's like trying to drive with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. You're not going to get very far.
It's exhausting even thinking about it.
Exactly, and it prevents you from fully immersing yourself in the English language. It's like watching a movie with subtitles. You're constantly distracted by the written words, and you miss out on the nuances of the actors' performances.
So it's about shifting our focus from the mechanics of translation to the art of expression,
Yeah.
of truly inhabiting the language now. What role does confidence play in developing fluency?
Confidence is absolutely crucial when you believe in yourself and your ability to communicate. You're more likely to take risks, to initiate conversations, and to push yourself beyond your comfort zone.
It's like having that inner cheerleader,
Yes.
urging us on, reminding us that we can do this.
Exactly, and that inner cheerleader can make all the difference when you approach speaking English with a positive attitude and a belief in your abilities. It shows in your body language, your tone of voice, and the overall fluency of your speech.
So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it.
It's about projecting that confidence and allowing ourselves to shine. But what about those moments when we feel intimidated or unsure of ourselves? How do we overcome those feelings and find our voice even in challenging situations?
That's a great question, and it's something that every language learner faces at some point. One of the most effective ways to overcome those feelings of intimidation is to reframe your perspective. Instead of focusing on the possibility of making mistakes or being judged, shift your attention to the message that you want to convey and the connection that you want to establish with the other person.
So shifting our focus from self-doubt to the purpose
Yes.
and intention behind our communication.
Precisely remember that communication is a two-way street. The other person is just as invested in the conversation as you are, and they want to understand you. They're not there to scrutinize your every word or grammatical structure.
It's about giving ourselves permission to be human.
To stumble and learn along the way and to trust in the other person's willingness to meet us halfway. Now, we've talked a lot about the mental and emotional aspects of fluency, but what about the physical side of things? How does our body language and overall presence impact our ability to communicate effectively?
That's a fantastic point. Our body language speaks volumes, often even more loudly than our words when you're speaking English. Pay attention to your posture, your eye contact, and your facial expressions. Stand tall, make eye contact with the person you're speaking to, and smile some finishes. These simple gestures can convey confidence, openness, and a genuine desire to connect.
It's like we're sending out these nonverbal signals
Yes.
that say, I'm engaged, I'm confident, and I'm excited to be here.
Exactly, and those signals can make all the difference in how your message is received. They create a more inviting and engaging atmosphere, making it easier for you to express yourself fluently and for the other person to understand and connect with what you're saying.
It's amazing how these subtle cues can have such a powerful impact on our communication. We've covered so much ground today, from rewiring our brains to think in English to mastering those nonverbal cues that enhance our fluency. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to the idea of finding our own unique voice within the English language. Can you elaborate on what that means and how we can embrace our individuality while still striving for fluency?
That's a beautiful question, and it's something that I'm deeply passionate about. Fluency isn't about becoming a carbon copy of a native speaker or conforming to some rigid set of rules. It's about embracing your own unique perspective, your cultural background, your personality, and allowing those elements to shine through in your English expression.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where authenticity meets fluency.
Yes.
Where our personality and our language skills harmonize to create something truly special.
Exactly. Think about it. When you meet someone who speaks multiple languages fluently, you're often drawn to their unique blend of cultural influences, their distinct accent, their personal way of expressing themselves. Those elements enrich their communication and make it all the more captivating.
It's like a tapestry woven from different threads.
Yeah.
Creating this beautiful and intricate design.
That's a wonderful analogy. And as you continue on your English fluency journey, remember to celebrate those unique threads that make you who you are. Don't be afraid to experiment with different styles, to incorporate elements of your native language, to let your personality shine through.
It's about embracing the journey, not just the destination, and allowing ourselves to evolve and grow along the way.
Precisely, the beauty of language is that it's constantly evolving, adapting, and absorbing new influences. And as you become more fluent in English, you'll have the opportunity to contribute your own unique voice to that ongoing evolution.
It's a truly empowering thought. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what advice would you give to learners who are feeling discouraged or overwhelmed by the challenges of mastering English fluency? What words of encouragement would you offer to help them stay motivated and focused on their goals?
That's such an important question, and one that I hear often from language learners. First and foremost, remember that you're not alone in this journey. Countless people around the world are learning English, facing similar challenges, and celebrating similar victories. So be kind to yourself, acknowledge your progress, and don't be afraid to seek support from fellow learners, teachers, or online communities.
It's about building that network of support and encouragement, reminding ourselves that we're all in this together.
Exactly. And secondly, remember that fluency is not a linear process. There will be days when you feel like you're making leaps and bounds, and there will be days when you feel stuck or even regress. That's perfectly normal. The key is to stay persistent, to celebrate those small victories, and to view those challenging moments as opportunities for growth and learning.
It's about embracing the ebb and flow of the learning process, knowing that every step forward or backward is part of the journey.
Exactly. And finally, never lose sight of your why. Why are you learning English? What are your goals and aspirations? Connecting with your purpose can provide a powerful source of motivation, especially when those inevitable challenges arise.
It's about reminding ourselves of the bigger picture, the doors that English fluency can open, the connections we can make, the dreams we can pursue.
Precisely so. To our listener, I encourage you to hold on to that why, to celebrate your unique journey, and to embrace the challenges and triumphs of mastering English fluency.
Those are truly inspiring words. And with that, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some additional tips and resources to help you continue on your path to English fluency. So we talked about retraining our brains, practical techniques, and even the importance of body language. Now let's dive into something you brought up earlier, the cultural side of fluency.
Yeah, it's something that learners often overlook. But language and culture are so deeply intertwined. The way we use idioms, humor, even our tone of voice, it's all shaped by cultural context.
So it's not just about mastering grammar and vocabulary.
Right.
But also understanding those cultural nuances that give those words their true meaning.
Exactly.
Like learning the secret handshake of a new community.
Yes, and those nuances can be really tricky to grasp from textbooks alone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about immersing yourself in the culture.
Okay.
Through movies, music, books, even just observing how people interact in everyday situations.
So becoming like an active observer, almost like an anthropologist studying the language.
Exactly.
In its natural habitat.
Pay attention to how people greet each other, how they express gratitude or disagreement, the subtle differences in humor and storytelling.
Okay.
These observations will enrich your understanding of the language and help you navigate social interactions more smoothly.
It's like adding layers of depth and texture to our fluency, move beyond just speaking correctly,
Yeah.
to understanding like the unspoken rules of communication.
And as you become more attuned to these cultural nuances, you'll find that your conversations become more engaging, more meaningful, and more enjoyable. You'll start to pick up on those subtle cues, those shared references that create a sense of connection and understanding.
It's like unlocking a secret code that allows us to connect with people
Yes.
on a deeper level. Now, I know there are tons of resources out there for English learners,
Well, yeah.
but can you share a few that you find particularly helpful for developing fluency?
Absolutely. One of my favorites is language exchange apps.
Okay.
These apps connect you with native English speakers who are learning your native language.
Cool.
You can practice speaking with each other and offer mutual support. It's a fantastic way to get real-time feedback and experience the natural flow of conversation.
It's like having a built-in conversation partner right there in your pocket.
Exactly.
What about resources for practicing those cultural nuances we were just talking about?
For that, I highly recommend immersing yourself in English language media. Find TV shows, movies, or YouTubers that resonate with you. And pay attention to how the characters interact, the expressions they use, and the overall tone of their communication. It's a fun and engaging way to absorb those cultural nuances without even realizing you're learning.
It's like a stealth mission for cultural fluency now, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on something that I know a lot of learners struggle with. The fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
What advice would you give to those who are hesitant to speak up because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing?
First, remember that everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers.
Okay.
It's a natural part of the learning process. Embrace those mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow, and don't be afraid to laugh at yourself along the way. A little self-deprecating humor can go a long way in diffusing any awkwardness and creating a more relaxed atmosphere.
It's about giving ourselves permission to be imperfect,
Yes.
to stumble and learn and to like find joy in the process.
Exactly. And secondly, shift your focus from perfection to progress. Instead of striving to speak flawlessly, aim to communicate your message clearly and confidently and celebrate every small victory along the way. Those little milestones will keep you motivated and remind you of how far you've come.
It's about acknowledging those small steps forward, those moments when we surprise ourselves.
Yeah.
With our own fluency and confidence now, as we wrap up this incredible deep dive, what's the one key takeaway that you want our listener to remember?
Fluency is not a destination. It's a journey. It's about constantly challenging yourself, exploring new techniques, embracing your unique voice, and finding joy in the process of learning. And remember, you are capable of achieving fluency. It's not about some magical talent or innate ability. It's about dedication, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the messy, beautiful journey of language acquisition.
That's a beautiful and inspiring message. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope you found this deep dive helpful and encouraging. Remember, the power to communicate fluently is within your grasp, so keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep believing in yourself. Until next time, happy learning.